Okay.
Your name is?
My name is Peter Grindley.
Peter, where are you from originally?
I'm originally from Oxford in England.
Okay.
I'm talking about the origins of the word ring and why is a ring square in the boxing pugilist term. And it goes back to the old days when people used to fight in fields because it was outlawed. And if you get a large lot of people together and they congregate together, they form a ring, not a geometrically square, as we know. Is that okay for you?
Sure. Now tell me a little bit about the history of the Queensberry rules from way back.
Okay, the Marquis of Queensberry. Basically what they did is, because it was outlawed, they brought it inside and made a 3-minute round. You went down for 10, and the reason they did that is they brought it inside so they could tax it, and that is the reason why, because once the fights came under a jurisdiction, they could tax the boxing. And the other one is Lord Lonsdale, because Marquis of Queensberry did not write the rules, they were written by somebody else, but he assumes that title. But Lord Lonsdale was another aficionado of boxing, and that's when you get the Lonsdale belt, which is you have to make 3 title defences of the British title to be awarded the Lonsdale belt. But all those pugilist days, you either had a fighter in a local pub that fought in a cellar, or he fought illegally in a field. Or in New York, in America days, it was on a barge, which is in the water, which is outside the jurisdictions of the local law enforcement. So they're the early days, and that was the bare knuckle days. But once they became under the Marquis of Queensberry rules, which was adopted by the Americans, then the last one was John L. Sullivan, who was bare knuckle and also the Boston Strong Boy, they called it.
Right.
Okay.
Right, now tell me a little bit. Now you've been a boxing fan for quite a bit of years of your life, I would imagine.
Yes.
And you're now resident here in Hawaii?
Yeah, I've lived here for 20 years.
20 years in Hawaii. Now we had the Brian Viloria fighting Saturday night, which I'm going to be refereeing against Miranda. What do you know about that fight?
I saw Brian Viloria's first professional fight, which was held at the Hawaii Convention Center. That was his very first fight, and I was working there at the time. So I watched him come and go, and he unfortunately is at a weight where you can't make a lot of money. Right. You've got to be very, very good, because people like to see big men. This is why you've just got the Klitschko's that have been at the top for so long, you know.
Right.
And Americans don't like that. They like the American to be the heavyweight champion of the world.
Right.
But yes, I followed it. Unfortunately, growing up in England, I never saw too many big fights. I saw Emil Griffiths fight Dave Charnley from Dartford, the Dartford Destroyer. Very few top Americans. I saw Jerry Quarry come over, and he fought Jack Bodell, who was a chicken farmer from Swadlincote. And Jack Bodell, being a southpaw, threw his right, and he had a lantern jaw, and he looked to see where it had gone, and Quarry took one step back and down he went. And it goes back to also when Floyd Patterson came over and fought Henry Cooper, and he called him Mr. Cooper at the weigh-in. He was very polite. So you've always got this reputation of the British horizontal heavyweight champion. You had Don Cockle, who was a light heavyweight, who came over, and Marciano dispatched him in San Francisco very quickly, because Cockle was overweight really, he was only a light heavyweight. Brian London, whose father Jack London held the title as well, so that was father and son, but he wasn't the top draw, you know, and he fought a few. I think he fought Clay when he was called Clay.
Exactly.
You know? And then you go back to the beginning of the films, J. Arthur Rank, and it shows you a great big gong, and the guy that bangs that gong is Bombardier Billy Wells, who was another heavyweight champion that we had. It was probably not quite up to the top mark, because if you go back in history, it's the Americans that have ruled it right since Jack Johnson took it, and he conned the title holder at the time. They said to him Johnson had a yellow streak, yeah, and he fought him in Australia. And if you look at the fight footage of the film, they come in and stop it, right? Because he was getting such a hiding. That was Burns, who he fought, and once he got that title, they tried to get it off him, outlawed him. Gunboat Smith was another one who was around that time, and the reason it's called cruiserweight, it goes back to naval times. A heavyweight would be a battleship, and a cruiser is not a battleship, but it's a little bit lighter, but that's where cruiser comes in, right? And all the weights that we know, which are still adopted today, now we've got cruiserweight, which is next to light heavy, right? And we had Freddie Mills, who was a light heavyweight champion of the world, fought Gus Lesnovich. Unfortunately, his demise came later on. And Falkenberg News, where he had his nightclub in Soho, where he was found presumably shot himself, but ran into money troubles. And usually find that fighters don't hold on to their acquired wealth. Only the top two. This is why not many of them hold on to their money or are, let's see, that can retire financially secure. But with the wealth that you've got today, and you've got to thank Lord Lonsdale for this, right? For bringing it inside so that he could tax it. Now it's a sport that's all over the world.
What do you think about boxing today compared to back in the yesteryears?
Boxing today, basically, after 10 fights, if they're any good, they're fighting for the World Championship. If you go back and you look at Archie Moore, they wouldn't give him a shot, but you have a look, he locked out 140 odd guys. He had 300-400, no, I think about 200 fights. Exactly. The records were longer then, you know. They lasted longer, they were journeymen, they learnt their skill. And if you look at Sugar Ray Robinson, who is Walker Smith, right, as we know, right, and was also danced at the Lido in Paris, very adept at his footwork, you know.
Tap dancer?
Yeah, that's right. And when you look at the fighters he fought, Randolph Turpin, who had a brother, Dick Turpin, but Randolph Turpin came from Leamington Spa in England. He took the title off of Robinson after he'd done a European tour with his entourage, with his pink Cadillac and everything. And luckily he beat the Sugar Ray Robinson that night. But on the return, in about 90 days, he quickly got it back. And he fought the fighter from Hawaii, Carl Bobo Olson.
Carl Bobo Olson, that's
yeah,
right.
Was from Hawaii.
Exactly, that was back in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, that would be the 50s. Turpin later on went up to light heavyweight for Alex Buxton, who was a British light heavyweight title. And he committed suicide, unfortunately. You know, so these guys, you know, not many of them were successful. Like Mr. Mayweather, who owed about $6 million in tax a little while ago, and he doesn't want to fight Pacquiao, you know, at the time. You've got Amir Khan in the mix, so the lighter weights are grabbing all the attention because the Klitschko's have got it sewn up, and I can't see anybody taking it off them yet. David Hay, unfortunately, blamed it on his little toe, right, you know, but I think Vitali might give him a shot because it's fresh in the public's mind and they can make a lot of money. Well,
Vitali and David Hay fought last Saturday. Vitali Klitschko and David Hay fought last Saturday.
No, that was Vladimir, the younger.
I take it back, Vladimir, yes.
That was the younger
Vladimir,
one.
Yeah.
He should have fought Vitali, the older guy, but he took the wrong one. Right?
Yeah.
Now Vitali has got Adamak, which he defends against.
Right.
If he beats him, because Hay wants to go out on a high point, right? He might get a chance with Vitali. It's fresh in the public's mind, it will generate money, especially if they hold it in Germany, and it will be a big payday for Vitali.
But David Hay just fought one of the Klitschko brothers last Saturday.
Yeah, that's Vladimir.
Yeah, and he looked terrible. Yeah, it was a very boring fight.
I agree with you.
And the fans, I don't think they want to pay money to see David Hay fight the other Klitschko brother because
They will if Vitali beats Adamak, which is not a foregone conclusion because he's the elder brother.
Right.
Okay. And Hay will make enough noise in the press. He's already got the American people interested. You know, if he wants to. He says he's going to retire, but I think if you dangle the fight for him, it could happen.
Exactly. Now, you talked about Emil Griffith before.
Yeah.
Back in the days, there was a fighter by the name of Gaspar Indian Ortega, and Gaspar Ortega is a gentleman that got me started in boxing when I was 12 years old. Now, you're talking about you've been here in Hawaii. Remember with the Blaisdell Arena where Brian Valori is going to fight this coming Saturday night. Well, when I was living here back in the early 60s, I fought myself 4 times at the Blaisdell Arena.
Wow.
Yeah, and Gaspar Ortega is a gentleman that brought me out here to Hawaii. So I lived out here for about 1.5 years.
Yes, thank you.
And I had 4 fights out here. I fought Paul Sebastian 3 consecutive times, a Filipino fighter here.
Yeah.
Every time we fought, I ended up beating him, but he was a tough fighter. But the fans wanted to see that rematch, and the first one, the second, and the third, because they were all exciting fights. Every 3 of those fights I got to win. Then I fought a Japanese by the name of Katsutomi Takano. And Katsutomi Takano was a stablemate of Paul Fuji, who was a lightweight champion of the world at the time. And I beat Katsutomi Takano, also a decision here at the Honolulu International Center. That it was called HIC back then. Now it's called the Blaisdell Arena.
Yeah.
So for me, it's an honor to be refereeing here this coming Saturday for the Brian Viloria and Miranda fight, because it'll bring back a lot of memories. I brought my grandson along with me on this trip.
Wow, great.
So he can see a little bit of my history.
Yeah, Julio Cesar Miranda. That's right. He's the guy that fights Viloria.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, you know a little bit about your boxing, and it's really nice to have you here on boxinginyourface.com, which is a website, and all the fans have been looking at lately, and it's an honor to have you here as a guest on our show, Boxing in Your Face. Thank you very much. Want to say a couple of words in closing?
Well, all I'd like to say to you is it's very nice to actually meet you. You've only adopted this on Firm But Fair. I've only noticed this to be over the last 3 or 4 years. So I think the referees now are actually becoming part of the scene. We used to have a referee in England who refereed wrestling. His name was Tiny Carr.
Okay.
And if he went down on the floor, it was Tiny's footwork that you looked at because he was part of the show.
Exactly.
But Harry Gibbs.
Harry Gibbs, great band.
Yeah.
I had the pleasure of meeting him.
Yeah, Harry Gibbs. I last met him in a pub in Dagenham. Where he was actually having a drink with somebody. But Harry Gibbs, they never forgave him. The British public never forgave him for giving it to Joe Bugner and Henry Cooper when Bugner beat Cooper for his title. They never forgave Harry Gibbs, and Cooper didn't shake his hands for a long time.
Really?
No, because Henry has just unfortunately passed away. But Henry, yes, and I remember Muhammad Ali coming over and he made this statement. He said, Henry the Fifth. It was like after the king, you know.
Right.
The Fifth. But yeah, I recognised you, Joe, and I thought, I know this guy. But obviously you introduced yourself, you know, which I'm glad you did. And I'm pleased about that.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And we had here one of the big fight fans from Hawaii, who happens to be living here in Hawaii now for the last 20 years, from Great Britain. And we'll catch you next week. Take care. BoxingInYourFace.com. Good luck.